What if I told you that within just a few hundred meters from where I'm standing now, you can find an abandoned building in the middle of the crossroads, Scotland's tallest listed residential tower, the remains of the 1930s Art Deco cinema, and a building that many locals still call by the name that officially disappeared decades ago. Most people know it as a busy traffic junction in the west of Glasgow, but behind the traffic and shops lies a fascinating story of how a rural farming area became part of one of the world's great industrial cities. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're exploring Anniesland, one of the Glasgow's busiest and most interesting neighborhoods. This is Anniesland Cross, one of the busiest junctions in Glasgow. This is where Great Western Road, Crow Road and Bearsden Road all meet, and thousands of cars pass through every single day. It feels like a completely modern place. Traffic lights, buses, shops, constant movement. But this area has a much older story, because long before any of this exists, Anniesland was actually a farmland, and the name itself comes from Anniesland Farm, which once stood here in this area before Glasgow expanded westwards. If you try to imagine it, it's almost impossible now. No traffic, no buildings, just open fields and quietness. Can you imagine that? I can't. Everything changed during the Industrial Revolution, when Glasgow expanded rapidly and suburbans like this one began to grow. Now let's talk about one of the strangest little buildings in Glasgow, which is right behind me actually. Right in the middle of the crossroads sits a small abandoned stone structure, and most people just pass by without even thinking, what is it, what it could be. I never really thought about or assuming what it could be. Well, maybe like a signal box or some electrical box or old office, but it's actually used to be a public toilet. And the funniest part is, wait for it, its official address, number 2 Anniesland Cross. Yes, number 2. Anyway, it's been sitting here empty for years now, and it has become one of those buildings everyone notices, but nobody really understands. There have been ideas for years about what it could be. Maybe some cafe, small business, different redevelopment plans, but for now it remains one of the Glasgow's most unusual forgotten structures. The rugby grounds in the area have been here for generations, long before much of the surrounding housing was built. It's one of those quiet parts of Anniesland history that people don't always think about. But sport has been part of this landscape for a very long time. Now let's look around. And what do you see? One of the most striking buildings here is Anniesland Mansion. This large red stone building wraps itself around the crossroads and immediately stands out. It dates from the early 1900s and it's category B listed. And what I really love about this building is details. The bay windows, the stonework, the carves of the building. It's very typical Glaswegian Edwardian confidence when the city was booming and building on a massive scale. This building has seen everything: horses-drawn carts, trams, the arrival of cars, and it's so many passing of them right now. The 2 world wars actually, and the complete transformation of this area from farmland to a very busy urban hub. And yet it's still standing here quietly, holding its place at the center of Anniesland, and I'm really glad it survived. It's actually not far from here. Clydebank was completely demolished in the Second World War, and this building is still standing. It's remarkable, isn't it? Now we move to one of the most recognizable landmarks in this area, Anniesland Court. You really can't miss it. It rises above everything else around it and it dominates the skyline. Completed in the late 1960s, and what makes it especially important is that it's the tallest listed residential building in Scotland. Well, people tend to have strong opinions about it. Some people love it and some people not so much. I personally am not sure about this building, but everyone recognizes it for sure. And for many locals, it's more than just a building. It's a landmark that tells you where you are or where your home is. This is Kelvin Court, one of the most distinctive and elegant residential buildings in Anniesland area. Built between 1937 and 1938, it was designed by Scottish architect James Newton Fatkin and is considered one of the Glasgow's finest examples of Art Deco architecture. At the time, these apartments represented modern and luxurious living. Their design was very different from the traditional tenements that Glasgow was known for, and nearly 90 years later, the buildings still look luxurious and remarkably stylish. There is something timeless about it. In fact, many people have compared Kelvin Court to Flooring Court in London, the building that was used as Poirot's apartment in the famous television series. And I can absolutely see why. In fact, whenever I look at Kelvin Court, it immediately reminds me of Poirot. I want to tell you a little story. Back in 1990s, when I was living in Russia, I used to watch Poirot with my mom. We'd sit together on the sofa and follow the mysteries every week. It was great. Such a great memories. So standing here in Anniesland, all these years later, I never expected that a building in Glasgow would bring back those memories. Funny how architecture can do that. Sometimes a building isn't just a building. Sometimes it can transport you back to a completely different place in time. In fact, Kelvin Court isn't the only Art Deco building in the area. In a minute, I will show you another one. This beautiful Art Deco frontage is all that remains of the former Ascot cinema. In the 1930s, this would have been a completely different scene. Bright lights, big crowds, queues stretching along the street, and the excitement of going to the pictures. It was one of those classic neighborhood cinemas where people would spend their Saturdays evening watching the latest movies. Unfortunately, over time, like many cinemas, it closed and most of the building was eventually demolished. But thankfully, this Art Deco frontage survived, a reminder of completely different era of entertainment in Glasgow. Now, directly opposite of Old Cinema is the building with its own history. Today it's the Wetherspoon pub, called the Esquire House, but many locals still call it the Esquire. Even my husband called it Esquire. When he first mentioned Esquire, I didn't know what he meant, was completely confused. But once I learned the history of it, it all made sense. The Esquire has been part of the local life for decades, and even though things changed, businesses changed, sometimes the old names just stick. And I think it's very Glaswegian, isn't it? The official name has changed, but the local name often survives for much longer. Another important part of Anniesland's story is the railway station. This is what helped transform the area in the first place. Without the railway, Anniesland would still have been rural land for much longer. But once the rail connection arrived, everything changed. It connected the west of Glasgow to the city centre and beyond, and made it possible to suburban like this to grow rapidly. Even today, it remains a busy and important transport link. This is Nicewood Anniesland Trinity Church, one of the area's most historic buildings. While the congregation itself relatively new, having been formed by the union of 3 local churches, the site has been a place of worship for well over a century. A few interesting facts. The original church on this site dates back to 1898 to 1899. The main church building followed in 1905 and was designed in Gothic style, used red sandstone, very Glaswegian, a material seen in many Glasgow Victorian churches. Over the years it was known as Anniesland Cross Church and later Temple Anniesland Church before becoming Nicewood Anniesland Trinity Church. The church reflects a wider story happening across Scotland, where congregations have merged as communities and church attendance have changed over time. I always find churches like this so fascinating. This building has stood here through 2 world wars, seen the growth of Anniesland from village to crossroads into a busy Glasgow area, and several changes of names and congregations. And today it represents not just one church, but 3 local churches communities that have come together. When this church was built, much of the Nicewood and Anniesland didn't exist yet. The area was still developing on the edge of Glasgow, and this church has watched the neighborhood growth for more than 120 years. So that is Anniesland, a place that most people simply pass through without second thought. But when you slow down and actually look around you, you realize that there is a lot happening here. A dwarven structure, a surviving Art Deco cinema frontage, a pub with a name that refuses to disappear, Scotland's tallest listed residential tower, a railway station that shaped the entire area, and even small abandoned buildings sitting quietly in the middle of crossroads with a most unusual addresses in Glasgow. Not bad for somewhere most people just drive through. If you enjoyed this walk around Anniesland, please let me know in the comments below. And if you like me to explore other parts of Glasgow, also leave a comment. There is so many places like this, areas that look completely ordinary at first glance, but turned out to have incredible stories. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then maybe you will like this one as well. Click on it. Until next time, bye for now.